still work in progress. I started working on this blend a couple of years ago, but still cannot balance it perfectly. This sample been aging for about 2 years, and it seems to be better than before. It's a blend of semi-oriental tobacco from Moldova, Turkish Samsun, Turkish Izmir, and Indonesian Sumatra.
How long does it take you to get a blend to work, man?
Well, it depends. Sometimes I get it right on the first try. Sometimes it takes few months, many different attempts. Well, I can get right flavor easily. If I know what I'm going for, to get right flavor is not a problem. But to balance it, so no one tobacco is overpowering the other, everything is burns well, and everything is in harmony. That's hard work.
Nice. Yeah, just jump in, guys.
I'm smoking Stockaby's Perfect English and a little pipe I got from Greece yesterday by George, I'll butcher his last name, Lausousis. Anyway, it's a very nice smoker, and I love the English. So
I'm having Cabinet Hogarth's Black Irish twist in my Savinelli 320. Or se Aano rusticated.
I was telling Boris this week, because he threw up some photos on the club page, that I love my Savinellis, my author shapes, but my 320s, but I do not look anywhere near as cool as Boris does when he rocks his Savinellis. Like, he's the boss of the 320 for sure.
I like this pipe quite a lot.
Super.
I have an interesting one. The Savinelli Capri, I've been told it's from the 60s. It's got a really neat texture to it. I'm not a big fan of the Dublin Zulu kind of shape, but I figured I'd break it out. I don't use it often enough, so.
Do you know, that looks extremely similar. Actually, a pipe I have, it's Rattray's Icebreaker. I got it last year. I don't know if you can turn up, but almost.
Oh, yeah. Very similar, yeah.
Cobra shape on it.
Yeah, I love Dublins. I love Dublins.
I have one Dublin Capri Root from Savinelli also. I wasn't a fan of the Dublins, but nowadays I am.
Well, it holds a special place for me because it's one of the first pipes that I restored successfully, we'll say. So might as well hang on to it.
Look nice. Glenn, you were throwing something up there. What are you smoking today?
I've got 5 Capris. They're wonderful pipes. This is one of my oldest. It's made by Monarch here in the U.S. It's a like a stylized rusticated poker, and I've had it for over 30 years, and it's a great smoking pipe. And today we're featuring the Scottish blend Strathspey from Cornell and Deal. Good stuff. But alas, the Scotch whiskey is all gone.
On the wrong whiskey, you need the Irish whiskey. It's the best one. I'm not biased at all.
Well, in my opinion, well, even though Irish invented whiskey, Scots perfected it.
I would have to agree with you there, Dimitri.
Thank you, Phil.
I'll agree 100%, but it's pushing me very, very hard.
No, there are still some amazing Irish whiskies.
Of course, coming from Northern Ireland, everything's biased for me because my pipe rack is pretty much all Petersons, and the same. It's Peterson Watson with even Peterson tobacco in it. So, you know, I'm not too adventurous.
Even were you the
well,
guy who was saying that you live so close to Peterson's factory, but you can't get there?
Yeah, I've every single pipe I've bought has had to come from Bedford in England, which is about a round trip for the pipe of 800 or 900 miles. But I'm only about 90 to 100 miles away from Dublin, which is a bit confusing. All the shops here in Northern Ireland have closed down. That would be kind of tobacco specific. We've only got one left called Miss Moran Belfast, but it's only open during work hours, so I never get down to it to have a nosy.
Well, don't forget that Peterson was founded by two immigrants, Peterson from Latvia and Kapp from Germany.
I know. Best of everything. Multicultural.
Yep.
Stephen,
Well, Ireland was always known to be a tolerant and accepting nation. There have always been people from everywhere living in Ireland, from the oldest days in history of Ireland.
That's probably because we're normally half cut and don't know what's going on around us.
Stephen, I'm a big fan of the Peterson pipe. I've got a deluxe right here with some early morning pipe. Big fan of Peterson. Got about 45.
Could I ask, is the early morning pipe the Peterson, the new Peterson, was Peterson's taken?
Yes.
Is it nice?
It's very good. We had somebody on from Smoking Pipes a couple weeks ago, and he assured us that the Peterson renditions are exactly the same as the Dunhill, and I'm enjoying. I like it very much.
What?
Very much like the Dunhill version.
Oh, great. I bought actually a selection of tobaccos there about 4 or 5 weeks ago, thinking that I'm not spending my money on anything else whilst I'm working at home. But I do have a early morning pipe sitting down here waiting to be opened, but I'm using up a couple of others. And just as you mentioned there, funnily enough, I got my first Dulux, one of the flat bottomed. I can't remember the number on it, but remember it offhand. My eyesight's going because it's dark.
Yeah, it's like the shape's very familiar. I don't know that. Is that a 406? I think.
Let's see if I can.
I don't have every number memorized. There's a lot of them.
20.
Hello, all.
All right.
Hello.
Hi, Jeff.
Hello, Jeffrey.
Hey, Jeff. Good to see
Hi.
you.
Well, thanks for having me.
Well,
Thanks
welcome.
for being here.
Jeff, are you smoking today?
I am not. It is 11 in the morning, so I'm not much of an early morning smoker.
I make an exception for the fact that half these guys here, it's like midnight. So
That's right. I figured it was halfway around the world for me.
10 past 9 p.m.
Typically, as many pipe clubs do when we commence, we just sort of get a sense of connecting by sharing what we're smoking and what's in the pipe and whatnot. And
Yeah.
and it's also a great way to sort of get a little bit of an insight into the different members of the club and whatnot.
Absolutely. Here, I can show you what I last smoked. How about that?
That'll do.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let's
By the
see
way, for those of you who are new to the meetings or new to Zoom, let me throw out a couple of really quick little technical things there. If you want to see any particular person, like Jeff, full screen, you can just mouse over his little camera square there, and there's a 3-dot menu, and if you click on that, it'll say pin video, and by clicking on that, you'll see mostly him and not the whole rest of the group. And then you can always toggle back to that. Up in the upper right-hand corner of your Zoom screen, there's a little thing a little grid view. It says, and you can come back to gallery view by doing that. If you're on a mobile device, a tablet or a phone or something, you can finger swipe to see different views, and you can finger swipe to a view where it's just Jeff. I'm going to turn off when he starts talking to us, I'm going to turn off all the mics. So he'll be just the only one popping up on that screen. When I do turn off the mics, it doesn't mean that you can't turn it back on again. You can turn your microphones back on anytime you want to, and ask questions and chat and, toss in some, whatever you want to share. I don't keep anybody from doing anything that they want to. We're all grown-ups. We're all gentlemen and gentlewomen as we join the group here. So, you guys know how to behave. If you're on a laptop or a desktop, you can actually use your space bar and just hold it down like a walkie-talkie and temporarily open up your mic. And then when you let go, it goes back off again. So a couple different ways to do that. And I just want to, not everybody is living on Zoom yet. So, although you will be. So just a couple of ways that give you some heads up on that. All right, back to Jeff, who's going to show us what he was smoking last. Go for it.
Yeah, I've got a pair of pipes here. One is this, which I have a good friend in New York who collects my work, and he also is a big fan of Hiro Tokutomi, and he bought an older Tokutomi pipe, and he said he likes to send me, on occasion he'll send me pipes to study by making them. And for those of you who are burgeoning pipe makers or full-time pipe makers, that's just such a great opportunity to learn about how other pipe makers work, is by studying their work and trying to replicate it. And so this was my version that I decided to keep for myself from a small batch of them that I made. So I really like this because it's probably a 25-minute smoke. If I'm tooling around the shop, I don't really, I'm lighting and the pipe goes out and I put it down and pick it up, and that 25 minutes can last me all day. The other one I was smoking is this one, which I also made, and I made this in 2010. This was my 495th pipe. And did anybody here, I'm sure a lot of you come to pipe shows, if you remember our friend Chip Kushner, who worked for Smoking Pipes. Chip passed away not too long ago and was just a wonderful friend of mine. He was a friend of mine since I first moved to California. I think I met him in 2007. And I made this pipe for him in 2010. And after he passed away, it was given to me out of his estate. And it was a special pipe. He loved it. And, I gave it a good cleaning. And now it's in my collection as a way to kind of remember my relationship with him. And in the smaller pipe, I was smoking some 1997 Royal Yacht, Dunhill Royal Yacht, which, it's a strong tobacco, but it's a good one. And that's why I smoke it in the small pipe. In the larger one, I was smoking some of the newer release, but I don't think it's made anymore, of the Dunhill Baby's Bottom. So yeah, that's what I had lined up.
This is the perfect time. Dimitri, let me do this little formality thing here, and then I'm going to turn it back to you. Okay, brother? Hold on a second. Partly because we have people watching over there on YouTube, and I just want to make sure that everybody is like, da, 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 da. We're very fortunate to have our guest speaker today, Jeff Gracik, the founder, right? And owner of J.Alan Pipes. And he's what I would call, like, I put up on Facebook, the young Turk of artisan pipes. He's a representative of the new generation of pipe makers, just by virtue of being younger than me.
Yeah, I'm not so young anymore.
So, well, I have a son who's 41, so that makes a lot of people younger than me.
So your son is a year older than me.
so
Actually,
you are.
No, I turn 41 next month. So.
But certainly here in the U.S., he represents a whole new generation of pipe makers, and that it all alone makes him very interesting. And then on top of that, he makes some damn nice pipes.
Oh, thank you.
So he is here to give us a virtual tour of the workshop and talk to us a little bit about his process, and then answer everybody's questions. Go for it. And that's all I'm going to say about it. Welcome, Jeff.
Well, thank you. Thanks so much.
Dimitri, floor is yours, brother.
Yes, I just want to show you a few more pipes I have with me today. Well, as a hardcore New Yorker, I'm partial to everything New York related. So I have this Burt-Gracik pipe, which I bought unsmoked, was made by grandfather of Vincent, who's current owner of Burt-Gracik, Algerian Briar. This pipe was made in 1950s, and I bought it unsmoked. I also have this Wilkie pipe. It's 1980s or 1970s, made by Wilkie sisters. And I have another beautiful pipe with me, made by Tim Thorpe, very talented young pipe maker from Cherry Hill, New Jersey. So he made it pipe specially for me to my specifications. It's very interesting shape. It's kind of combination of pot and bulldog.
Very fancy.
Dimitri's got a giant collection. We're going to have to like see inside your collection one of these days, man.
I have like only 100 something, not that many. So for example, Vernon Wig, member of our New York Pipe Club and former president of New York Pipe Club, he has over 3,000 pipes. And a lot of them still unsmoked. Actually, I bought few pipes from him.
I thought I had a problem when I could say I had 20 to 25 pipes, Dimitri, but I think you need to see somebody.
I have only corn cobs. I have probably between 30 and 40, only corn cobs, not counting briars and meerschaums and flays.
I only have like 6 pipes. I'm trying to hunt down for that 7th in the rotation.
Well, I've been smoking longer than you. I started smoking pipe like probably 25, 26 years ago.
Yep, that was probably before I was born.
Well,
probably when I was stealing my dad's cigarettes.
Tim, hold up your pipe again there, brother.
This is a this is an Allen Brothers, which was made for my pipe club, Sherlock Holmes Pipe Club of Boston. They did the pipe club for us one year, the Allen Brothers, which is Jeff's offshoot of his regular pipe business. And this is just an awesome pipe. I mean, the fit and finish are just amazing. And the sandblast, I would describe it as, I don't know, maybe a little more softer or subtle, but it's absolutely beautiful. And most importantly, it's an absolute amazing smoker for a wonderful price. I know, Jeff, you're discontinuing the line, but for those of you, if you want to grab an Allen Brothers, great smoking pipe at a really good price, man.
I shall have a nosy.
That seems like a good segue. Let me introduce our guest speaker and have him take it away, and then just be confident that we'll have lots of time for question and answer, and you guys can just pick his brain, suck it dry there. But
yeah.
Jeff, if you would, for the 3 guys here who don't know you and don't know your backstory, why don't you give us an introduction and then talk whatever you want.
Yeah, absolutely. So my name is Jeff Burt-Gracik. I am a pipe maker, and I made my first pipe in December of 2003, sold my first pipe in September of 2004. And I was in graduate school at the time, was thinking about going to earn my PhD, become a professor. But by the time I finished up my degree in 2006, I had been fortunate enough to have learned and studied with some fantastic pipe makers, and had gained enough attention for my work that I was able to go full time. It was never a plan. It was never, I didn't put together a business plan and have, my 5-year outlook. Instead, I just thought, well, we're moving to California. My wife got a job out here. I was in New Jersey at the time when I started. And we were pregnant with our first child. And I figured, hey, let's make a go of it. So it's been, well, my daughter's 13 now. So it's been a few years. I've been a pipe maker now for 16, 17 years. Over that time period, I have been fortunate enough to have people reach out to me so I could pass on the knowledge that I learned and earned by traveling around the world, and have trained a lot of pipe makers. And a lot of them are really, really gifted, have worked very hard to refine their skills. And it's been really rewarding to see how I've been able to kind of pass the torch in that way, in the same way that people so generously shared their knowledge with me. Let's see. I've had this is my third workshop in San Diego. By third workshop, I mean place of residence. No, it's my fourth. Some of the people I trained with when I started out, the first person I ever worked with was Todd Johnson. Some of you may know who Todd is. He's one of the premier American pipe makers. And just incidentally, when I was in graduate school, he happened to be studying the same subject at a school nearby. And I just so happened to be going to graduate school with his brother-in-law. So I was having a beer while studying one night, and he was like, "Oh, my brother-in-law makes pipes." And I said, "Oh, no kidding." And made introductions and got invited up to his workshop in July of 2004. It was like drinking from a fire hose. I thought I knew everything. And over that short stay, a couple days with him, I learned I knew nothing, and came home and changed everything. My wife was working 4 jobs at the time. And she calls herself my angel investor. She gave me we'd had our family money. She agreed to invest $500 into a lathe, which is how I kind of started changing the way that I made pipes. Then I was fortunate to meet Tawny Nielsen at the Columbus Pipe Show in 2005. It was 2004, and he invited me to come work with him, which blew my mind, because that was a name that I knew. When I heard of Todd, I didn't know who he was, because I didn't know who any pipe makers were. Went and worked with Tawny over 24 hours. I was just there for one day, and I learned so much, and became friends with Jody Davis, who I met at the same Columbus Pipe Show, and that's also where I met some of the smoking pipes people. And became good friends with Jody, flew down to see him in Yuma, Arizona a couple times. And when I moved to San Diego, he was only 2 hours away. So if any of you own any of my pipes that were made in, 2006, 2007, they were all sandblasted. All of the sandblasts from that period were blasted in Yuma at Jody's shop. I used to spend a week every month in Jody's house. Because I had a very, very tiny shop and no money to set one up. So, so then I've moved around a bit since then, and I'd be happy to give you guys a shop tour. I don't know what you had planned for after I kind of did my brief, elongated introduction.
I let the, first of all, you're doing great, man. So
thanks.
Just keep it going. Things may occur to you that that pops up into your head. Just go for it. I also let.
We'll be here all day if I do that.
There's a few of regulars here who won't mind that whatsoever, but I'm going to let them sort of shout out some questions.
Sure.
Maybe we'll take a quick Q&A and before we do the shop tour. How would that work?
That'd be perfect. Yeah. By the way, you know, I've used Zoom. My kids have been home from school because of the pandemic, so that's all they've been using. So I'm familiar enough to get them on and off of it, but I'm seeing some text questions pop up here and there. How do I access those? Oh, you're muted.
If you go down to the bottom of your Zoom screen, you'll see a little icon that says chat.
I'm on an iPad here.
Oh, you're on an iPad.
Yeah. Oh, there. Okay, I see the chat. There we go.
Open up in chat, and I'll help you out too. I'll pop out some of those questions for the rest.
Gotcha.
Of the
Yeah, that'd be helpful because it actually covers my whole screen. Oh, you're muted.
Yeah, Terry says I have questions, but I want the tour first.
Okay.
I have a question.
Yeah, go for it, Alexa.
What is one of the most premier pipes that you have created? Like one of the more higher end.
Oh wow. So I've had there's one that's really special, and then I'll talk about a few collections that I've made. So I have a pipe that I finished around Christmas of this year. It's actually in New York, and it is, some of you who are familiar with my work may know that I have, like a lot of pipe makers, I have grades. Well, I only have one grade. I have the wave grade, and because I enjoy surfing, so I figured that was appropriate. So the wave grade is my highest grade. I use it probably once a year. I've had years where I don't use it at all. And the wave grade pipes are obviously very, very special and they stand out from the rest of my work. Well, this past Christmas, I had a client who he orders a Christmas pipe every year, and he likes smooth pipes only. And I like to pull a really nice block for him. Well, I pulled this out and I thought, oh, this is a special one. It's been sitting, waiting for a nice occasion. And I got done with it and I said, my goodness, this may be the finest grain pipe I've ever made. It is probably the premier wave that I've ever made. And it just so happened that it was pipe number 1600. All of my pipes are serial numbered from the very first one I ever made. And it was kind of fun when I was pitching or showing him the photos for it. I was able to put it next to the first pipe that I ever made. I was going to see if I can find those photos for you here and maybe put one up on the screen for you. So that's a pretty special pipe. I've also made 3 7-day sets, and those are obviously special because it takes a lot more effort to make something like that, because it's not just 7 pipes thrown into a box together. I actually had to meet with a local woodworker and design a box that was going to be, I decided I wanted to have a theme for the set, for each of the sets. And all of the pipes were tied to that theme, but the box had to tie it all together. And so the most recent one that I made was, it was a wave grade set. Not every pipe in it was a wave grade, but it had several. And the box was made out of curly koa, which is a Hawaiian wood. And it was originally, well, it has long been used as a wood for old wooden surfboards. And it had a maple, pieces of maple run through to join the parts together. And that was to be the maple wood, which is used in the center of a surfboard. It's called a stringer that helps support it and give it strength. So the box was tied to the idea of a surfboard, and it had my wave emblem in the middle of it. And then each of the pipes was on that theme as well. And it was really difficult and a lot of fun to make. I don't do them that often because getting that grade of wood or coming up with the themes for a set like that, it's really challenging. It takes a lot of time to just sit with a sketch pad and and work through pipes. Because if I'm trying to put 7 pipes into a set and they have to be a particular grade, I could shape 3, 4, 5 pipes of or 5 pieces of wood for each one of them, and that leaves me with a lot that I've got to find places for later. So as a pipe maker, as a professional pipe maker, you have those business decisions that you're trying to balance with the creative ones. And I found that pipe. I'm going to hold it up to the screen. I don't know if I can screen share, but this is the 1600th pipe that I made and the first pipe that I ever made.
That's pretty nice. Which one's the 1600?
This one.
Oh, that's pretty nice. And
that was the first pipe that I ever made.
Oh. Well, thank you for sharing.
Yeah.
Much better than my first pipe.
Yeah, that first pipe did not suck whatsoever.
I've made some ugly ones since then, believe me.
I have a quick question for you, just to toss one in. So as a fellow surfer, although I learned to surf in Hawaii when I lived there, and I won't surf in America. What would you say is your connection between surfing and pipe making?
I think they're just things that bring me joy, and there's that aloha spirit. I kind of it's something that joins people together. There's a quietness and a solitude to surfing, and there can be that with pipe smoking, but it's also a social thing. So I'll go surfing with friends, and you're together but also separate. It's not like you're sitting there chatting the whole time, but you can talk. Oh, did you see that wave that I was on? It's not unlike what you were doing when I came into the call, where people are discussing what they're smoking or why they're smoking it, and maybe how they picked it up and why it's special or why they chose it for this event.
That's a great answer, man. All right, gentlemen, whatever you want to, just go ahead and shout out. If I've turned your microphone off, it's only to prevent some feedback and for your
Are we getting, I have a street out here.
No, you're good.
Are we getting a lot of noise? Okay,
No,
because I can shut the door. It just,
No, be comfortable. You're good.
Okay.
I just want to let everybody else know that we're not picking on you or preventing you. So just go ahead and shout out your question.
Hello?
Yeah, Carmelo, go ahead.
Yes, so I say hello from Switzerland.
Hello.
I'm here by this club. Jeff, I like very much your work that you do. I'm a hobby pipe maker. And this is the second pipe that I made.
Ah, okay.
And this is the last one, number 10. It's a little bit different numbers.
Yeah.
So the question is, how important is for you the Lathe when you begin to use the lathe?
Can you repeat the question? I'm sorry, there was a car driving by.
How important is for you to begin to use the lathe?
Ah, okay. So this is these equipment related questions. I'm sure that you can imagine that they're pretty common, that I get them a lot. And I think that a lathe has some very specific purposes in pipe making. And if your goal is to make your own mouthpieces, handmade mouthpieces, then a lathe is critical for that. And I wouldn't recommend moving on to making your own mouthpieces unless you have some reasons for doing so. Maybe you want the higher quality material, which feels different in the teeth than stock or preformed mouthpieces. The quality of the ebonite is different, although the acrylic is identical. If you smoke acrylic pipes, then it doesn't really matter. The other thing is having the freedom to shape it. So let's see here. Here's a pipe that I finished yesterday. So the mouthpiece for this it would be challenging to make that without a lathe, simply because you have to put stainless steel inside of it.
Yeah.
But that can be done with a drill press.
Mm.
The primary reason that you would use a lathe would be to to do fittings like this. This is mammoth ivory.
Yeah.
Or to turn special shapes on the mouthpiece. And look, here's that. So if I was going to do a mouthpiece that has this kind of shape to it, it can't be done on a drill press or any other way. You can try it by hand, and that's one of those things where if you're just doing it for fun, have fun, do it. You could probably get it very close to perfect. But if you're a professional, then you have the question of whether you want to spend the hours and hours and hours it'll take to do that, or do you want to turn this shape in 5 minutes? So, but the other advantage that a lathe offers is a little more freedom in shaping, because you can shape first and drill second, which is what I do, or you can turn classic shapes. You can't really do that without a lathe. But if you are, like the first 7 pipes that I made, I didn't have a lathe. I had a $25 drill press that it was horrible, but it got the job done. I was able to drill the holes. They were more or less on center. I would take the drill press and lay it on its side on my bench and kind of arrange things in a certain way. Use a clamp to hold my shop vac underneath it and put a shaping wheel in it. And that's how I shaped. And the drill press turned on its side. And the same for polishing. I just left the drill press on its side with polishing wheels. If it's most of these drill presses are adjustable speed. I mean, that's a way to, we would say bootstrapping it. And I used what I had. I had a drill press and I had a Dremel. And every dollar that I was getting, I was putting into buying better materials until my wife gave me the family loan.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yeah, of course.
Don't want to butt in on anyone else. I'm just giving them a second to see if anyone else is going to ask questions before me. I do a fair bit of woodwork in my spare time and have a lot of plateau briar sitting about from Italy, just giving it a wee bit more time to dry out. But being extra careful,
One moment. I'm sorry. I saw how blown out my lighting was. Okay. Sorry about that.
Oh, you're grand. Sure, if you see me, I'm hallowed and green, Well,
it's still bad.
No, I thought you were grand there, unless.
Okay. Okay. So the question was again.
Basically that I would do quite a lot of woodwork in the spare time. I have a lot of plateau briar sitting aging pretty much for as long as. But with briar being so sort of heat resistant as it is, one of the things that I would do quite a lot or get a lot of in woodwork is pyography in terms of portraits on, say, ochre or somewhat similar. But the plan is, at least anyway, to attempt doing pipe very shortly, which may end up being very good or very bad, depending on how much whiskey I've had before I start the project, But the question was actually just whether you've had any experiences of trying to burn images onto the side of briar, given its sort of resistance to heat, and whether that would tend to spread out of control, whenever you're trying to do.
I see. Yeah. Yeah. So you're going to use like a wood burning iron.
Yeah, I've got just because I can only ever draw in a sort of silhouette thing, but just as an example to try and get you a bit of an because I heard you were on here and I had to come on, of course, have a wee chat. Something like this, but of a much smaller.
I can't think of a reason why it wouldn't work. It is very heat resistant, and it's not going to catch on fire, if that's what your concern is. And don't quote me on that. And if we need to get lawyers involved,
very
yeah. but I don't think that you would have an issue with it. It'll char on the outside in the same way that it would char on the inside when you're smoking it, and extinguish pretty quickly. In fact, it would probably, the burning or the charring would be so localized to the iron that you'd be able to sand back any of the non-burned areas to help create a little more relief, if that makes sense.
Yeah. No, yeah, that's pretty much it. It's just with say briarwood, the grain's so tight, you don't tend to come across the soft wood in amongst it the same way you would do with say oak. I get a bit more of a spread out grain where it spreads like wildfire when or cedar say. So it's pretty much just where I go and ruin some 60-year-old briar, you know.
Yeah.
Okay, Stephen, I can add to that. I have a pipe by Mookie Lieberman, Israeli pipe maker. I've seen a bunch of his pipes, and his name is Burned into a Shank. It works very well. It looks really good, and if it just stamped, it might actually fade away, especially if you clean and polish the pipe. But when it's burnt into briar, it will stay there. So I think it's a very good way to make mark on the pipe.
I'll call you unfortunate for generations ahead that I'm going to be stuck on a piece of wood for a couple of 100 years, eh?
There we go. Anybody else? Go ahead and just hop in with your questions for Jeff, and then if we'll take a tour.
So here's a question before you do the tour instead of waiting. How wide do you normally cut your slot and funnel?
1 moment here. Okay. The question again was?
How wide do you normally cut your slot in your funnel?
So I'm one of those very special pipe makers that does not measure. I couldn't tell you. It's about that wide.
Okay.
But let me take some measurements for you, and because I do it by eye, but they're all pretty consistent. So
here's one I'm working on.
Okay.
Come on.
Let me see here. I've got to scroll to see who is.
This is Terry.
Oh, Terry Stevens. Okay.
I don't know if you can see that.
Oh no, I can't.
Terry, just put it right up to the. Oh, there we go. That's good. Little light on it.
Okay. So these two that I just measured are both 8 millimeters wide.
Okay, this one's a little wider than that, but its stem is wider. This is like my 10th or 11th pipe.
We've got another visitor here.
Aw.
So, yeah, I wish I could give you a little more. Are there any other measurements that you need, or any additional information I could give you about maybe how to shape it, or do you have any other questions about it, or just the width?
More just a quick idea. Is this stem going to be okay? This is only my second hand cut stem.
Okay. I mean, the slot from what you showed to me, it looks pretty good. It's pretty wide. That, some pipe makers make them really wide. Some of them make them not as wide. That's pretty wide. How wide is the mouthpiece in overall at the button?
I want to say it's a good 13 or 14 millimeters.
Okay.
I don't remember. I haven't measured in a few days. So
gotcha. There is a measurement that I know, believe it or not. The measurement for all of my mouthpieces that I start with for the width, the exception being larger pipes, but almost all of my mouthpieces start at 640 thousandths of an inch wide.
Okay.
Yeah. And that's, I want my clients to know what to expect when they buy a pipe. So if it's your first pipe or your 5th or your 10th, I want it to feel similar in the mouth in terms of like the dimensions. as the previous ones you purchased.
Okay.
Yeah.
So,
Jeff, go ahead, Tim, and then I've got a question that came up on YouTube over here. Tim, go ahead.
Jeff, while we're on mouthpieces, I know you work primarily with vulcanite and Cumberland stems. When you're working with acrylic, do you have any suggestions for, like, when you're turning acrylic, try to keep it from like getting all gunked up and burning up? Depending on what I'm doing, sometimes I get these like white marks in it and it's kind of yucky, and I got to try to sand them out. And any suggestions on how to try to minimize that?
Yeah. So that's a common problem with acrylics, and it usually comes from taking too much material at once, dull tools, and the speed that you're turning. And so, for instance, like if you're drilling it out, when you're drilling acrylic, that you have to just go little by little, right? Because it'll overheat, and if it overheats, it binds, and then you can have a big problem on your hand. The same is true for when you're cutting the tenon or cutting shapes into it. If you try to hog too much material at once, especially with a dull tool, it's just going to burn. And that's what's happening, is you're getting probably the tool edge that you're using. So let me see if I can create a visual here. Here we go. This is looking at the end of your vulcanite, right?
Yep. Okay.
And if your tool, let's imagine that this, okay, let's imagine this is straight across here. So you have an angle on the cut, right? This is your cutting tool. If it's a little bit too high, you're actually touching a flat surface to the edge of the material.
Okay.
And if it's too low, it's less of a problem. But you want it to come in directly in the middle, and you want only that edge, like a knife blade that's cutting it. So you need to keep that really sharp, because even if you're sharpening the edge and round it over just a touch, now you're pressing, it's trying to remove material through friction, and that's just not going to work. And it's more, it's a problem with vulcanite as well, but it's much more of a problem because of melting with acrylic. So the nice thing about acrylic, though, is that once you get a sharp edge, like you'll almost never need to resharpen it, because that stuff is not abrasive at all. With vulcanite, I need to sharpen halfway through making the mouthpiece.
Okay, that's really helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, of course.
Thank you.
Jeff, we have a question over here. Gil asks, how can you tell a pipe will be a good smoker in the, like before you actually,
sure.
You're gonna preamble it. How can you tell if a pipe is a good smoker? What are the criteria?
Yeah, so the first is materials, the second is design, and the third is construction. Those are the three things that affect the way that a pipe would smoke. So if you're using good materials, and by good materials, I mean if you're using that your briar is from a good source, it's been properly treated and then cured. And curing is, the only curing that a pipe maker needs to do. And there are a small number of pipe makers who would dispute this, and that's fine. All you need to do to cure it is dry it out. Once the moisture level is low enough, then it's fine to use for making pipes. The next thing that you need, and the same goes for bamboo or other materials. My opinion is that the smoke should only come in contact with the natural materials, with the exception of the mouthpiece and the stainless steel joints. So you'll never find me use, like, the horn shouldn't come in contact with the smoke, or if it does, just only a slice of it, like for a horn ferrule. Because every time the smoke is coming in contact with a material, especially a natural material, it's going to pick up some of those flavors, and that will affect the way that it smokes. So that was materials. The materials have to be good and treated well. The second thing is that it has to be made properly, right? And to be made properly, that means that the tobacco chamber has to be the proper shape. and it has to be the proper size. There are multiple things that we can look, multiple shapes that are appropriate, I think, but some of them smoke better than others based on my experience. Now I'm an expert in my own experience, and that's it. Let me see if I can flip the camera here and I'll show you. Here we go. So we've got three basic shapes here that I use. The first and simplest is straight sides, parallel sides, and a round nose. This, in my opinion, is the quintessential pipe chamber profile. And the reason is those parallel sides will allow the tobacco to burn evenly all the way down, and it's not compressing or condensing bad flavors altogether. That's one of the problems with tapered drill bits, is that you're pushing all of the dawdle and the moisture and everything all together to one point on the bottom and concentrates it on the entry point for the draft hole. But this allows it to burn evenly all the way down, and at the bottom there is sufficient area down here for the moisture to spread out and not collect. Now, obviously, gravity is going to pull it down, but it gives it more surface area for it to spread out, and that makes for a drier smoke. The second best, in my opinion, is the parabolic. So it's identical to the other one, except the nose on it is parabolic. And I use that for doublins, for pipe shapes that have a narrower bottom on this. This helps keep the bottom of the pipe thick enough that it won't burn out or get overly hot, but will smoke similarly to the rounded nose. And then the last one, this is an oversized one, this is about as tapered as I will get. So the sides are tapered as it gets to the bottom. I'm sure some of you own or have seen pipes that come to a point on the bottom. In my opinion, those will never smoke well. And the reason is you can't smoke the bottom quarter to half inch, period, because it chokes off the draft hole. The second is all of the moisture goes down to a single point on the very bottom, which makes it a wet smoker. This isn't a universal, but that has been my experience, broadly speaking, about that style of chamber. So these three are the primary ones, or the only profiles that you'll see me use. There'll be various sizes of them, but those are the three overall profiles. The second piece of the design or construction is that the draft hole is appropriately sized. That is a matter of opinion. I think there is a size that's too small, and there's a size probably that's too large, although I've never made one that big. But if you have an 1/8 inch draft hole running through for your pipe, you may like it, and that's fine. I'm not going to argue with you, but for me and for my customers, or at least what I will offer them, that's just too small. It'll be like trying to drink a milkshake with a coffee stirrer. You want it to be large enough that you can actually pull some smoke through it and keep that ember burning. For me, the size that I use is 4 millimeters or 5/32 of an inch. And then the final thing is the mouthpiece design. Mouthpiece has to be comfortable, but primarily the inside of it has to be the same volume of airflow that you would find through the 4 millimeters. And the way that I achieve that is by using a tapered drill, but it starts at 4 millimeters and tapers down. And then I use a little saw, and the discussion we had earlier about the slot. The purpose of the slot is to take that airflow and keep it consistent, because you can't have a circle running all the way to the end. Otherwise the mouthpiece would be too thick. So you flatten it out and you distribute the airflow out this direction along between the lips of the pipe. So that's construction. And then the third piece, what did I say? We've got materials, we've got construction, and I lost my train of thought. Anybody want to help me out?
I think you said sorcery. Was that one?
Sorcery, that's it. Yeah, well, so materials and construction. If I think of the third one, then I'll hit you back with it.
You were talking to draft hole size.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's in construction.
So I have a quick follow-up on that, just based on something that you just said.
Sure.
And that is, so I'm looking at this Eltang Basic right here.
Mm-hmm.
So I have some, like my clay pipes where the stem is essentially just a tube, like you were saying.
Mm-hmm.
But Tom has created this little tip on there where it flattens out, like you were just talking about.
Yeah.
So if I'm following you right, that all of my clays would benefit from a mouthpiece like this, which would sort of regulate the airflow.
No, actually, the ideal would be to take that mouthpiece off of there and just smoke the shank, because you're not disrupting the airflow at all. But the reason we have the mouthpiece is that it's comfortable. If you want to hold that tube in your teeth to maximize it, it's kind of like driving a race car that has everything stripped out of it, and it's made to do one thing. But when you buy, a consumer car, like you have all these other features that reduce the performance but make it comfortable to drive, and that's so you're trying to balance things out to make it so that it not only performs well, but it's also comfortable to use.
Got it. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Gentlemen, what else? We got an obvious expert here who's not only expert in the craft of pipe making, but he's a teacher. Like as a teacher myself, I'm really appreciating the way that you're, talking about the process in a way that we can all understand. So guys, pick his brain.
The third element was design.
Oh, yeah. Thank you. See, someone was listening. It wasn't me. I wasn't listening to what I was saying. So the design is the other piece of what makes a pipe smoke well, and the design can be like how heavy is it, right? So if you have walls that are too thick, you have a really big pipe. Some people might like that, and there's not a problem with that. But for me, if I'm a clencher, I don't want a pipe to be too heavy, and so the design affects how heavy it feels in your teeth. If you is it a bent pipe or a straight pipe? If it's a large pipe, bending it a little bit helps affect the way that it feels in your teeth if you're a clencher. So that is a factor as well. The shape of the bowl affects how it feels in your hand. All of these things, they play a role in how you enjoy the pipe. And so that's, to me, that's why those things are important. So the materials affect the flavor, the internal design or construction affects the way that the tobacco burns and the way that you enjoy it, and then the design from like the mouthpiece proportions, the manufacturing of that, the sanding, polishing, all of this, as well as the bend in the pipe, the overall shape of it, the size, the mass. This affects not only what you're seeing visually, which does affect our experience of something, but also it changes the way that you enjoy the pipe while you're smoking it.
Jeff, do you use a wood lathe or do you exclusively use a metal lathe?
I have two metal lathes. A wood lathe can certainly be used. A metal lathe makes it a whole lot easier to do to make mouthpieces. So the metal lathe is for making really precise cuts. I'll flip the camera around here and you can see what I've got. So this is a 1920s or 30s era Craftsman lathe made by the Atlas Company in Chicago, Illinois. And this is the lathe that I use for turning classic pipes. So you can see I've got a block here for turning a bent billiard. It has been sitting there for about a month and a half. So one day it'll become a pipe. And then I have another larger lathe. This is the one that I use for most of my my work in the workshop. This is everything from drilling to making mouthpieces. The other lathe is not as precise.
Okay.
And you can use a wood lathe to turn a classic pipe. You can use it to make mouthpieces. I know people who've turned tenons by hand on a wood lathe. I'm not one of those people, but I know it can be done. In fact, I think the Dunhill factory in London they used wood lathes to turn the tenons on their mouthpieces, which I find extremely impressive.
I have to use a Tenon tool. I have a Craftsman's wood lathe, an old Craftsman's wood lathe.
Okay.
Hey, Jeff, I have two questions, actually.
Sure.
It sounds like there's a lot of beginning pipe makers here. I'm one of them. And
who am I hearing from here?
Oh, this is Charles.
Oh, hey, Charles.
Hey. So I guess the first question is if you go on, like the Pipe Makers Forum or talk to a lot of experienced pipe makers, they recommend perfecting the billiard.
Sure.
And so, how important do you feel that is? And why the billiard? Why not the apple or brandy?
Yeah.
And then my second question is, what's the best wave you've ever served?
Best wave I've ever served. All right. Well, I'm going to answer that one first.
Okay.
I distinctly remember this wave because it was, I heard music when I dropped in on that wave. It was incredible. I'd been surfing for about a year in Ocean Beach here in San Diego. I lived there for a couple of years, and I went surfing every morning.
I've surfed Ocean Beach.
Oh, have you really? That's where I learned to surf, off the pier.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah. So I lived 2 blocks from the beach. Had my workshop there. I could hear the waves breaking from my workshop. It was a little slice of heaven for a little while. And I went down, and I had no business being out that day. I was not experienced enough, but it was calm. It was a lull, which I hadn't stuck around long enough to figure out, and paddled out. And suddenly I saw a set come in, and I thought, I'll do the thing every young surfer does. You get excited when you see the first wave, and I turned around and it just picked me up. It was overhead. And it was amazing. I heard music from in my ears so distinctly as if the band was playing behind me. Made it all the way to shore, because that's what you do when you're a new surfer. And I turned around to paddle back out, and the new surfer mistake is that you don't catch the first wave because there are 2 or 3 following it. Well, yeah, I got hammered by those. So, but I distinctly remember that wave. So to the billiard question, I think we can, no, it is not necessary to make a billiard. I think that the billiard is used because it is such a common shape, and it is like the quintessential pipe shape. It can be an apple, it can be a Dublin, it can be whatever pipe you're making. The point is that you want to pick a shape and learn to make that shape well. So make it, the story that I heard when I first started was from a guy named Keith Moore. Some of you may have known him when he was at Uptown's Pipe Shop in Nashville. Keith advised me to make a billiard or another classic pipe. And this was advice that came from Sixten Everson himself. So I have no reason to argue with it. Sixten said, make a billiard until you can make it perfectly. And I think he told this to Yaskonovich or to his son Lars. And then they finally brought the billiard to him, had worked and made it perfect. And he looks at it and says, yeah, that's good. Go make 10 more. And so the point is, you want to be able to make it really, really well, whatever shape it is. And the reason he picked a billiard is because it's common and because it's appreciated everywhere. And because it is a common form, it's easy to identify what's right and what's wrong. much more easily than if you were to say a fugu blowfish or a volcano or something. Like, what's right or what's wrong about a volcano? There's so much variation in the shape, but a straight billiard is a straight billiard is a straight billiard. There are some subtle variations, but there are some elements that make it a billiard that are, different than what would distinguish one volcano from another. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. So what do you, maybe what are the most common mistakes that you see beginning pipe makers make on their straight billiards?
So let me grab a billiard here. Here we go. It's one of my favorite pipes. So one thing, can you guys see this?
Yep, 5x5.
Yep.
Excellent. So you can see the shoulders here. Do you see how precise those are? Right back here? And how that matches. Look at the line here, and it's more or less a mirror image from one side to the other, right? Let's see if I can. This is really challenging to do, and people either make it too hard, so they make a hard edge in there, or they make it too soft, where they're afraid to dig in. And so what often you'll see is that back shoulder is way outside of where it ought to be. So as you're turning the pipe, can you see how that line is more or less the same as we rotate? That's what you're looking for as a pipe maker when you're shaping the bottom of the bowl. You know, when you're turning a billiard on the lathe, you're only shaping the top part of it above the shank, and then from the shank from here to here. You're turning it with a lathe, so that's going to be round. Now the profile is a little difficult to execute, but it's more easy to pick up than taking the pipe off the lathe, and now you have this square portion on the bottom that now you have to do that by hand. So it's kind of, there are multiple steps to it. The turning it on the lathe is one set of skills, but then you pull it off and you go, oh my goodness, I'm not assisted now. I have to do this all by hand. That's a real challenge to get in there and have the courage to do it, like the boldness to go and shape the bottom of this bowl off, and take it as far as you need to without, but also the caution to not take too much. And that's the balance that we as pipe makers are trying to negotiate. You want to take enough, but not too much. Let me see if I can find one here that's shaped, but the bottom's not gone from here. Yeah, here we go. So this is how it looks when it comes off the lathe. So the top looks good. That's a nice shape, but it's going to look horrible if you don't get that bottom executed. And the only way to do that is by hand, unless you have a phrasing machine, and then you work in a pipe factory and you probably have a lot more experience than I do. So does that help?
Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you.
For sure.
Me as well. That helps a lot.
Good.
I hate billiards.
I'd like
Sounds
to
like you
jump
need to
in
make
here
some
for
more.
a second, if I could.
Sure.
It's my first time on here, David, and thank you for allowing me to be on here.
Jim, welcome.
I'm on here because I belong to the San Diego Pipe Club, and Bud is also on here that belongs to the Pipe Club. In fact, I think he's our vice president. And talking about Ocean Beach, I was just down there yesterday and went on down further and walked the Sunset Cliffs. And
oh yeah,
beautiful day there yesterday. A little cool, windy.
Mm-hmm.
It was really nice though, really nice. So to another San Diegan, Jeffrey. Hello.
Hello. Cheers.
Actually, I live in Hamul, but I was born and raised in San Diego.
Yeah. All right. Well, yeah. Shoot me a message or send me an email afterwards. I didn't realize that the San Diego Pipe Club was still operational.
Oh,
because I think Chip started it,
You did.
My friend Kip Kushner years ago, and then when he left, I didn't know that it had continued. So
Kind of got resurrected.
Still there.
Mm-hmm.
Good. Well, send me a message. I'd love to join you guys one night.
Yeah, I think that we have about 20, almost 30 people that.
Wow.
On Sundays, usually we've been doing virtual on Zoom on Sundays also. But
okay. Well, yeah. Please do message me because I'd love to meet up with you all.
Okay, cool.
This is my only function, bringing pipe smokers together around the world. So
I'm smoking a Savinelli St. Nicholas 2019 with some proper English. I know you guys do this at the beginning of the meeting, but Bud will confirm this. I'm usually late to the meetings. It's kind of a teasing that he does with me.
I should actually say thanks to all you guys. I started smoking pipes about 3 or 4 years ago, and unfortunately, it seems to have been a completely dead art. And Northern Ireland, I think I've only seen one other person smoking a pipe, and it was some extremely old lad in a car who looked like he was trying to dodge the last nail in his coffin. Didn't get to have a chat to him, unfortunately, but yeah, this is probably the first time I've actually had a bit of a chin wag with a bunch of other guys smoking pipes. So thanks for the experience.
yeah, Stephen, welcome. It's nice. Hopefully you'll join us as often as you can.
Yes, I'll try and limit my my intake of other chemicals.
Mixing it up is good. That's all.
Yeah, spice of life. Thanks.
Jeff, maybe I don't want to jump in case there are some other questions, but if we're at a good point, how would you like to sort of walk us through an imaginary creation of a pipe from beginning to end, using the shop tour to sort of lead us from station to station?
That's great. I'd be happy to do that. So let us see. Now, my fancy pipe studio is my garage. So I'm going to open the door here to let a little more light in. Hopefully it doesn't blow out everything. I had a very, very busy day yesterday and did not clean up anything. So my apologies, but not really. I'm not that sorry. All right, so let's see here. So this is my workbench. This is where I spend the majority of my time making pipes right there. You can see under the workbench, I've got my racks of briar. It's about 500 blocks of briar. Some of them, I think the oldest one in there I bought in 2004. Up through last year, I have another order coming in, should be here hopefully this week. And you can see right here, I have a stack of started and not finished pipes. A bunch of other pipes that I've gotten bored with.
Check the mail today.
A whole bucket full of pipes, a couple hundred of them in there that haven't been finished. So part of the joy for me of making pipes is the act of creation. I simply love creating. And you can see with this stack of unfinished pipes, sometimes the act of creativity is just moving on, creating and learning when to stop and deciding when maybe there's a time to come back to this, but right now I'm not feeling this pipe, so I'm just going to move on. It's wasteful, but it's part of my process, and it's worked so far. So what I'll do is, let's say I have a customer who has an order. Then I pull out my blocks and I start digging through to find the right shape for a block, or the right block for a shape rather. And that can be really, really challenging. There may be, out of the 500 blocks here, there may be only 1 or 2 blocks that are suitable for a particular shape, because perhaps the customer has a shape and size that he is interested in. And that's pretty challenging. So then what I'll do is I'll take the block of briar and I'll sketch the shape on the side of it, like so, and walk it over to my bandsaw,
where I'll cut out the basic shape. And this just saves me some shaping time, some wear on my my grinding wheel, and helps me see if there are any flaws on the inside of the block or any changes in the grain that would mean that I would need to alter my plans for the pipe. And then I turn around to my grinding station, and right here I have a 36 grit grinding wheel that's used for like metal and concrete, and also by pipe makers all across the world. It can they last forever, and I use it to take the pipe, the rough or the block of briar, and shape it something like this. So this is a pipe that is straight off of that wheel. And after I've shaped it, I come back over to my workbench where I sketch some lines on it like this. And those, like we were talking about the construction of the pipe. Well, this is part of the construction. So this helps me line up the holes that are going on that'll be drilling in the pipe. The chamber drill has to meet up right here with the airway, and then this line is for my my mortise. And I put these blocks on there to. I'll show you how I drill it here in a moment. The important thing with design here is I want to have the right profile of drill bit, like I was saying earlier. But also I want to have enough thickness in the bottom where so that the pipe won't burn out. And that's how I determine I have that in mind when I am laying out these lines, because I can, for this pipe, I can actually move the tobacco chamber angle back a little bit to create a little more thickness on the heel, or lift it up just a little bit to make a little more thickness on the heel. So after I do this, I come over to my lathe where I will hold it in my hand and use the chamber bit right here to drill the holes. After I've drilled the holes, then and this is set up for this process right now, the pipe goes on. Let's see if I can get this there. The pipe goes on this pin, and I spin it around to make the end of the shank flat. And then I take all of this out, and I cut my rod stock. So I pick the right diameter and color, if I want to use Cumberland, of rod stock, and cut it to size, and take it back to the same lathe where I will machine it and cut the tenon and make sure that the holes are all aligned and right. After which I bring it back over here to my workbench. Let's find that, where I'll take the mouthpiece, and it has usually just it just has a, let's see if I've got one here. There. When it's off the lathe, this is straight off the lathe. So the tenon is turned. I've polished it. It's drilled out with a tapered drill bit. You can see all the way through there. And it has a 1/16 of an inch hole. I take the 1/16 inch hole with this drill bit here, and I do that with it. After I've cut the slot, then I use some of my needle files here to refine it. And then I take the mouthpiece, once it looks like this, back to that same grinding wheel, and I rough shape it. After I have rough shaped it, then I use these files here to finish shape it, and then hand sand it and polish it on my polishing wheel. And it kind of depends on the design of the pipe, how I approach this. Sometimes I'll finish the mouthpiece before I continue the rest of it. Sometimes the mouthpiece is the last thing I finish. It just depends on the pipe. So an example would be a pipe like this that has where the mouthpiece is set in. I can finish the entire pipe before I even start with the mouthpiece, because it's not flush and it's not like an integral part of the rest of the pipe. This is a pipe that's for me because it has a hole from the inside all the way to the outside. And for those who wonder, it'll smoke just fine and it will never burn out. You have to work really hard to burn a pipe out, and I don't work that hard, at least at burning pipes out. So then there's a lot. I have these other sanding wheels. This is for fine sanding, helping refine the shape. So when I've drilled the holes in the pipe, and it has the scratch marks in it from the heavy grinding disc, then I'll take it to my refining disc, and I use a 6-inch 150 grit wheel, and then a smaller 220 grit wheel, and occasionally a 400 grit wheel. After I've done that, then I go back over to my workbench and spend Lord knows how much time hand sanding it. This pipe is at the hand sanding stage. So that is my next step with it. That's what I'm going to do when I get off the call with you all today, is continue working on this pipe. When I get it to usually about halfway through the hand sanding is when I determine whether or not the pipe is going to be, if the pipe were on the fence between sandblasting or leaving it smooth, it's about halfway through the hand sanding that I determine once and for all whether it's going to be sandblast or not. So if it's smooth, I'll continue sanding, put my stain on it, spend 4 or 5 days with the finishing, and then polish it and put my stamp on it and hopefully send it off to a happy new customer. If it's going to be a sandblast, let's say, for instance, that one, or yeah, like this. This I could take straight to the sandblaster right here. And I use two of the biggest tools in my shop, two of the biggest, most expensive tools in my shop and just about every pipe maker's shop. And this is the irony of it. You use to make the cheapest pipes that you make. So you need to buy all this expensive equipment so that you don't have to throw pipes away. But I use this big compressor and this sandblaster or sandblasting cabinet to sandblast my pipes. And then I put the finishes on them. So here's a sandblast that I just finished up yesterday. This is going to smokingpipes.com. So that should be there in a couple weeks. I've got one that's going to be maybe on my website soon. I just finished this one up yesterday too. So yeah, after I've sandblasted, I come back over here to the workbench, I put the color on it and do all the final assembly and finishing touches. And then I put my stamp on it. I have a digital catalog where I keep track of all the serial numbers and finishes and everything for every pipe. So for those of you who do own my pipes or look for estate ones, there are some counterfeits out there, which I suppose is flattering, but also, you know, pretty bad. If you have any question, just contact me, and I have the serial numbers from everything, so I can tell you when it was made and everything for most of them. I lost some of the early records, or I'd have to look through files and they're written down by hand, and I really don't want to do that.
Jeff, how long does it take you to finish a pipe?
From start to finish?
Yeah.
That's hard to say. And the reason is I don't really work on a pipe from start to finish. So for a smooth pipe, because it takes so long to do all of the finishing work with it, that makes it really challenging. I'm working on other things while I'm waiting for the finishes to dry or cure, for the stain to dry so I can sand it. Some of the stains take a full day just to dry enough so that I can sand them. So, you know, I finish usually in like an average of 2 pipes a week. So yesterday I finished 5 pipes, but I didn't, you know, there were pipes that I've been working on for 2.5 weeks.
I guess part of my thought when you said you're delivering that pipe to Smoking Pipes, and then I watch sometimes, I've seen a few of them exhibit your pipes when they come in. So my curiosity is, how many pipes do you deliver when you send a batch to something like Smoking Pipes, and how long is that process?
Yeah, so it's a good question. So it kind of depends on the dealer. So there are times when I'll send Smoking Pipes, like 3 pipes, because that's, you know, they want to put an update out and they're out. Other times where they want, you know, a couple updates worth, so I'll send them 6 or 7 pipes. Kind of depends on what I have and what they need. Sometimes, like, they'll say, hey, we need pipes, and, you know, I've got some, I can build some time into my schedule to work just for them, and they'll, you know, spend a few weeks making pipes just for them.
Jeff, I have a question.
Sure.
I see those little blocks of wood on the bottom of your unfinished pipes. What's their purpose?
Oh, now you're asking for the shop secrets? I don't know. I'm happy to share that. So when, you know, I mentioned that I drill the bowls by hand, right? So that's only for freehand shapes. For pipes that I turn on the lathe, like billiards, classic shapes, those ones are drilled on the lathe while they're in the chuck. It's a different process for making the pipe. For freehand pipes, part of the reason, I'm going to back up just a little bit. I promise I'm going to get to your answer. The reason that we shape freehand is we can take blocks that have grain. I'm going to see if I can find an example here for you. When you get, this is a great one. Okay, so when I get briar from the cutter, if I want to make a classic shape, if I want to make a billiard and a block of briar, the briar has to be cut in a very specific way. Otherwise, the grain won't be straight up and down. So, you know, back in the day, if some of you guys had collected classic pipes from Dunhill, from Savinelli, from Sassini, from whomever, finding the straight grain classics, it was really, really hard, right? Because a lot of times it would flame out on one side, or you get straight grain only on one side, but 3/4 of it didn't have anything. And that's because the briar comes in, it's not always, the grain isn't always aligned with the sides of the block. So let me show you here. So this is a good example. You see how can you guys see the grain in this? How it's more or less, it's not straight, but it's kind of sloping from inside to outside, and same on the other side. Do y'all see that? This is a good candidate for a classic pipe from the front profile. Then we have to look at the side and see if the same is true. And this is a pretty good candidate because the grain is really straight. But then you get a block like this, and it's not. Because if I want to make a classic like it's sketched on there, I need to turn the block this way, and that's really limiting. And the reason you need to turn the block is because the jaws that I'm holding the block in are parallel, right? And so I can't turn that shape without making it the sides of the block parallel with that center line that I've drawn through there. So the advantage of freehand shaping is that I'm not locked into that chuck. I can take any block of briar and shape it any way that I want to create the best shape for the grain that's in that block. And then I can drill it afterwards because I'm holding it in my hand, which is infinitely manipulatable. You guys can help me. The English teachers or people from England can really help me out with that word. So because I can manipulate my hand to more directions, it just makes it so that the limit is my imagination for making the shape. So I've shaped some crazy or even some normal shape in a block of briar that I would not have otherwise been able to make in the same way if I had turned it or drilled it on a lathe with the chuck. And then I bring it over to my lathe. I've drawn those little, I've drawn the lines like I showed you and put the blocks on there. But the question is, how do I keep everything lined up? How do I make sure all the holes connect at the right point, right? How do I, what if the tenon is this way and the draft hole's this way and it's the draft hole and the tobacco chamber don't meet up? Well, then I've screwed up. So I need a little bit of safety. And the safety comes from these blocks. I've drawn the lines, which are my guidelines, and that shows me where, can you see the draft hole line right here? And then you've got a tobacco chamber line. Well,
yep.
I know I want my tobacco chamber to be right there. And so I put that block and I draw the cross on there. And then in my tailstock on my lathe, I have this little point, which I put right there. And that guides it. It keeps it on a consistent line as I am advancing it into the drill bit, whether it's the drill bit for the airway, whether it's the drill bit for the mortise, or the tobacco chamber.
You drill the chamber or the airway first?
I drill the mortise first, then, so this is, so I drill the mortise first, then I drill the airway, and then I bring the tobacco chamber to meet the airway. And the reason I drill in, I have a reason that I drill in that order. The mortise, because I want to have a fixed depth and dimensions, and then I can make some changes to the airway if I need to. The airway, then I can, after I've drilled the mortise, then I can help locate, it makes it easier to locate the airway in the right place in the bottom of the mortise. After I've drilled the airway, now I've taken it as far out as the distance that it needs to go to meet up with the tobacco chamber. Then I drill a pilot hole that goes and meets that draft hole. And this allows me to make any changes that I might need to make. Sometimes I'm off just a little bit, and then I can adjust it with the larger tobacco chamber bit afterwards. So I do it in that order to help account for common mistakes or changes that need to be made. It helps reduce my my overall throwaway rate.
Your block idea is ingenious, by the way. That was the one thing I was really wondering about, sticking a bit of the fire into the lathe. So thank you very much for solving that problem.
Oh, for sure, for sure. I'm sorry for the long meandering result, but I thought it could help give some more context to it to explain a little more of the pipe making process.
Actually, there's a YouTube video on that.
I think that I saw one or two other guys who started to ask a question. Just this good point. Just jump in.
I have another question. This Charles again.
Hey, Charles.
Hey, Mike. So my question is about design, and I see design as it's the profession of marrying form and function. And
yes.
So my question is more about form, and if you have any principles or rules of thumb that you go on to create a balance in the shapes, colors, dimensions of the bowl and the shank and the stem and any adornment you might use, and what are some of the things that you see people do wrong, or kind of go wrong with that. Sometimes you see a pipe and you just can't put your finger on what it is, but it just kind of looks awkward.
Yeah. I mean, I can usually put my finger on it, but I think just to back up from that a little bit, you've got the form and function question. And then I think the other part of the question has to do with taste. And the taste question is not one that I can, I can speak to only from my own perspective and say, like, there are some things that I like and some things that I don't like, but you know, I can look at a pipe that's, you know, that's well made, well designed, meaning like there's like a coherence to the design, but I don't like. But dozens of other people may love it, and that's fine. Some people like pink mouthpieces. That's fine. It's not for me. I don't own any, and I have no intention of making them. But you know, there's some pipe makers who make some beautiful pipes with materials that I wouldn't use. I tend to like my taste tends to be a little more conservative in design. So I like to have a minimal number of adornments. So if, for instance, if I have a bamboo pipe, you'll rarely see me add anything other than bamboo to the pipe. The bamboo is the decoration for that pipe. If I'm putting ivorite on a pipe, that will be the only decoration on it. I like to have mouthpiece material, briar, and if there is a decoration, then the decoration. But any more than that to me gets a little messy. But that's my personal taste. Now to the form and function question, that is, you know, kind of goes back to the earlier question, like what are the three things that make a good smoking pipe? I can look at a pipe and say, yeah, that's not a good pipe. I don't think it's a good pipe because I don't think it'll smoke well also. Often those things go hand in hand. Sometimes it's construction related, meaning like parts haven't been joined properly, or just sloppy. And other times, like I can look at the design and say, there's just no way that's going to smoke well. It's bent too much for the types of materials that it used, or the mouthpiece is too long and wonky. It's a little visually heavy on that side. There has to be to my mind, there has to be some kind of balance for there to be beauty. But you know, there is a little bit of taste that bleeds over into that as well. Sometimes I'll look at a pipe and I say the walls, I mean, it's a beautiful pipe, but the walls are way too thin. I would never make that pipe because I don't want my customers to be disappointed when the pipe that I spent time working on, they spent their hard-earned money to buy, breaks. So I think a couple different ways to approach that, I guess. Does that help? Is that, or do you have some other angle?
No, it's an interesting point you bring up about taste. You know, I think a lot of aesthetic is probably cultural and somewhat personal. But I was just curious, what you might do with that question, and so yeah, I appreciate the answer.
Yeah, for sure.
Jeff, can I ask a question?
Sure.
Hello, first of all, from Scotland.
Hello.
I've been to, just very briefly, I've been to Old Mission Beach about 35 years ago.
I live really near there.
Okay. We played Old Mission Beach Athletic Club.
Okay.
Yeah, cool. Anyway, so my question is this. You mentioned very briefly stains there in your process. What stains and methods of application have you come to trust over the years?
Well, method of application. I apply all my stain with these.
See, I knew there was sorcery involved.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's so high tech.
Yeah, really fancy BJ Long pipe cleaners or whatever you find. But the stains, it's pretty simple. I wish it were more complex than this, but it's not. I use shoe leather dye. One of the principles that, like, for staining that was taught to me by Jim Cook, but also reinforced by reading some other books on woodworking outside of the pipe making field. And this is where a lot of young or hobby pipe makers can go wrong, is they try to mix their solvents. So typically when you are using a leather dye, the leather dyes that I use, they have an alcohol solvent. But you could also get ones that have an oil solvent. And then I use some wood dyes as well that are water-based. If I'm using, let's say I want to do a contrast stain that's red, I have a dark red that I apply first. I sand it off to create that contrast, and then I want to put yellow over top of it. But if they're both alcohol-based, that yellow alcohol-based dye, I've spent all this time sanding the red dye to get it look a very particular way, and then I put an alcohol-based solvent on top of it, and now it's lifted that red dye and made it all muddy. So you've wasted all that time, and I see that a lot when I go to pipe shows. A lot of pipes, like, oh my goodness, I mean, it's an otherwise really well-made pipe, and then with one swipe of the stain applicator, you've kind of ruined all that work.
Okay.
So when you're staining, like, experiment with dyes. You don't just need to use you don't only have to use these ones. You can go explore, go to your hardware stores, go to specialty woodworking shops, but make sure that if you want to contrast that you are not mixing your solvents between the layers.
Yeah.
And the same goes for the finish that you put on top. I did a video a month or so ago on shellac. Shellac is perfectly fine as a pipe finish. I wouldn't advise it for smooth pipes because it's a pain in the tuchus. But also, it's alcohol based typically. So if you're going to be putting it on, it's going to lift the dye that you put on beforehand. So I don't use, my smooth pipes are finished with an oil because I find that it makes all of the sanding work that I've done on my staining, it preserves that and locks it in place the way I want it to be. So again, very long answer to a very simple question.
Great answer. Thanks for that. Cheers.
Yeah, that's a brilliant answer.
I suppose, yeah.
Definitely, thank you. You just helped me.
Yeah.
Jeff, I'm confused by the language though. Are you suggesting if you're doing this is Steve, I'm sorry, doing a contrast dye, are you suggesting using two different base, alcohol versus oil, so that one doesn't lift the other, or? Do
not use two.
Okay, you
want to use, so let's say for a smooth contrast stain, you have it's a 3-step process, right? So you've got 3 things you're adding to it. You've got your base color, usually the darker color, then you have your lighter color to highlight, and then you have the finish that you're putting on over top of it. Each of those needs to have a different solvent so that one doesn't lift the color from or the work that you've put in on the previous step. Does that make sense?
I think that's what I thought you were saying. Yes. So
yeah.
A different solvent in each step rather than the same solvent in 2, and then you just you lift the. Okay. Thank you very much.
Yeah, of course.
So this is Jim again, talking about that 2-stage of staining. Is there a preference of which type of body, whether it be the alcohol, the oil, be the first stain that you put down?
I don't usually, yes. So I don't do a water, I use a water-based stain for my highlight coat. And the reason is the water just doesn't soak in as much as the alcohol does. It's really probably a fraction of a millimeter difference, but that fraction of a millimeter is meaningful when you're removing so little material with the hand sanding. Most of your sanding, when you're doing the contrast stain, most of your sanding is actually just removing the superficial layer of stain itself without even touching the wood. Only the last little bit of the sanding is actually removing any wood.
Thank you. Reason why I'm interested in it, I've been making Native American flutes since 1994.
Okay.
I've never stained them before. I do like the natural grain that's in the wood, but hearing this about the staining process, I'd really be able to, let's say if I do a bird's eye maple or something, to do the contrast to bring out that the eye more or something like that. So thank you.
Sure. I just saw a question pop up. So to clarify this about alcohol versus water or anything, I recommend not using alcohol for only one step in the process. So if you're using an alcohol solution for or solvent for one of your stains, don't use it for anything else. If you're using oil for one step in the staining process or the finishing process, don't use it for anything else. So if I'm doing 3 steps, I'll use alcohol, water, oil. in that order. There are exceptions to that. You can experiment and play, but if you use that, if you use those solvents in that order, you're going to have a lot more success right away.
Jeff, you mentioned you don't like using shellac on smooth finishes because of how difficult it is to get it right.
Yeah.
What do you prefer?
Oil.
So like tung oil?
This is the only secret that I have. The only secret that I have is which oil. I'm generally pretty open with everything. And the only reason, I would encourage you to experiment with different Danish type oils. Tung oil, I've never used, but go to the hardware store, go to a specialty wood shop, do some playing around and find what works best for you.
Okay.
That's what I did. I went through dozens and dozens of them before I finally found one that I liked and a process for applying it that works for me.
Now, the reason I asked is I bought some shellac recently. I used to just stain it, polish it, and put carnival wax on it and be done.
Yeah.
I bought some shellac because that's what I was reading was a good idea. And I'm noticing that as soon as I start putting the shellac on, all of that staining work just blends.
Exactly. That's what you're finding. You're finding exactly what I was just describing, right?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, and that's a big problem with it. And there's also that it gets tacky, and it's hard to you put that spit coat on. So if you're going to use shellac as a finish, you'll use your little pipe cleaner there. You'll apply it very quickly to the pipe, and then get a paper towel or a cloth immediately and wipe it all off. So you want a uniform matte finish everywhere, but it is really hard to do that. And the layer is so thin that when you take it to the polishing wheel, there's a fine line between too thin and too thick. So if it's too thin, then when you go to polish it, you'll immediately remove the stain, the top coat of stain, and then you have to go through everything all over again. But if you get it too thick, then it starts to gum up and it gets really funky and creates problems. So that's why I use shellac exclusively on my smooth pipes for probably 8-9 years before I visited my friend Cornelius Mentz in Germany. And he said, "Oh no, I use oil." And then I visited the Per Hansen and Alf Nolesmeyer at S-Bang, and they're like, "Oh no, we use oil." And pretty much every Dane's like, "Oh no, what you're using shellac? That's foolish. Why would you do that?" It works, but it's a pain in the butt.
Well, I appreciate it. I'm going to make a trip to the Woodcrafters store now.
All right. Have fun.
Jeff, on kind of a follow-up on that, talking about secrets, and that is your mentoring other new pipe makers. So I know that you've got videos that you're putting out on your YouTube channel and also on your website. Do you have any guys that, before COVID, I would guess, came to your garage and you apprenticed them through the process? And can you talk about that?
I've taught a lot of pipe makers. I think, some names you might know. Ernie Markle was one of my first and earliest students. Steve Liskey, who I don't think is making pipes as often anymore. He's from here in California. Overseas, like I used to have these pipe maker seminars I did it a couple years in a row. We call it the Seminar by the Sea. And I had Ping Zhan, who's become a good friend. He's a fantastic pipe maker from Dalian, China. Davide Iafisco from Bologna, Italy. There are dozens of pipe makers who have come and worked with me over the years, but I think you saw that I offer that. I do offer the one-on-one training now. I found that as my career moved on, it was harder and harder for me to find that time to host those events, especially, life moves on and kids get older. And so I've had to find other ways to do that. And this is the solution I've got right now. By the way, I was just thinking about this. I didn't have a chance to mention it on my social media yesterday, but I have a Father's Day discount that I just started yesterday. And if anybody who is watching was interested, coupon code Father's Day, all caps, on my website. It offers 15% off anything except for pipes through the end of next week. So that's from the video pipe making sessions, t-shirts, coffee mugs, all that fun stuff. So
this is awesome.
Sorry for the shameless plug.
No, I want you to do as many shameless plugs as you got.
That's all I got. Sorry.
I do want to, so we typically try to contain this to about a 2-hour block so that nobody gets in trouble with family and whatnot and doesn't take up your whole weekend. But this has been, there's a lot more than we could draw out of you. So gentlemen, if you want to, if you can, want to go for another 15, 20 minutes before we call it a day?
Sounds like a plan, my only friend at the moment.
Sure. Yeah, and if that's, if Jeff got the time to hang out with us.
Yeah. I mean, hey, I don't want to bore you all to tears, so.
I don't think we're running into that problem at all. Not at all.
Okay, good.
Yeah. I have a question that came up on the YouTube channel. Let me just pass it on and then, throw it back to the group again. So Gil has another question about slightly off topic from what we've been talking about, and that is your favorite tobaccos to smoke. And he asked about your top 3 and what pipes, if you have a special pipe that you dedicate to those blends, what would they be?
Oh, I am. I believe Konovich uses this term as well, but I am a pipe swine. I don't dedicate. I smoke any tobacco in any pipe. I don't really. I'll take. If someone has a good aromatic, I'll pop it into a pipe that I smoke in English and then a smoke of Virginia after it. I don't really. I don't care all that much about it. It just adds to the character of the pipe. But let's see here. I've got some of my favorite go-tos. My favorite Virginia. I don't think I have any up here. Well, I guess I don't need to show you. You all know what tobacco looks like. I have my very favorite Virginia is McCraney's Red Ribbon, or McClellan 5100. I have a little bit left. I'm so sad that they went out of or they chose to close down, as you all know, and I'm sure all of you are sad as well. But yeah, love that stuff, especially the 1983 crop. If you haven't had it and can get your hands on a tin of that, that's some special tobacco. I also really like Exotique from Smoker's Haven. Smoked that for years and years and years. I love that stuff. It has one of my favorite room notes of any tobacco. And then Dunhill's Aperitif is another one of my favorites.
You really have to go and try something called Mango from uktobacco.com. They've blended their own one, but as room notes and even as tastes on the palate, really, really nice.
Yeah, it's called Mango.
Yeah, I can't remember the exact name of it, but if you go into Loose Tobacco within their website, I think it's called Topped Mango, and probably one of the most unusual flavors you could expect, perhaps, of tobacco. But great stuff.
It's what's the website? UK Tobacco.
uktobacco.com.
I'll check it out. Thank you.
Cracker.
Are you going to be at the West Coast Pipe Club or show?
If we're allowed to travel.
Yeah, good point.
Yeah, it kind of all depends. We all know what's going on right now, and we have some older family members who are nearby who have some pre-existing conditions that we are around. So even if it's easier to get out, I may not be there for that reason. But if at all possible, I'll be there. I've never missed it.
That makes sense, and I hope you can make it there, but I understand your reasons for maybe not. I'm planning to make that my very first pipe show. So.
Oh, wonderful! It's a great show, and like I said, I've never missed it. Although this year I heard it's on Halloween.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, so we'll see. I have 2 young kids, and I love y'all, but you know, I
Yeah,
will.
family's got to come first.
I'll be here for my kids.
Jeff, what is your website? I don't
My
know if you
website-
mentioned that before.
It's J.Alan, J-A-L-A-N, pipes.com.
Okay.
Jeff, talk to us about the name of your pipes and your pipe company.
Yeah. You know, back before when I was young and know a little bit less, like I was going to say don't know anything, but I knew slightly less than I know now, which is not all that much. I thought Gracik was probably too complicated a last name for people to pronounce. And, you know, I was an athlete all through school, so I got used to hearing my name be mispronounced over loudspeakers. And I figured, oh, they're not going to figure this out. That was before I knew of Everson and Konovich and Kavicki and all of these equally interesting names from an American perspective. So, so I figured, you know, I'll have some kind of pseudonym. My middle name is Alan. I had a buddy, Tyler Beard, at Tyler Lane Pipes, and he had the name Tyler Lane. Lane was his middle name, and I thought, well, I can't copy him exactly, so I'll use my first initial, like Jody Davis. So it's kind of a hybrid of Jody Davis and Tyler Beard. I just copied.
How about disasters and heartaches? Have you had a block on the lathe and just approaching where you thought this is great, the grain is perfect, and either uncovered a huge sand pit or it broke or you drilled through?
Oh, yeah, I have. It's recent and it's still fresh, and I'm a little sad you brought it up. But let me see.
Way to go, Glenn.
Fresh scar to open up.
It's around here somewhere. There's not much left of it. Where did I put it?
After you've told yours.
Well, I'm just going to have to describe it for you so you don't have to watch me like sob as I'm looking around my workshop. In the very, very first batch of briar I ever ordered, after I had, you know, paid my family back for the lathe, saved up a few coins and spent like maybe $500 on an order of briar. And I thought, oh man, I've made it now. I ordered a batch of briar. I wasn't buying one block at a time. I got 20 blocks. And they came in, and it was, in that box was one of the most beautiful blocks of briar I had ever seen anywhere in the world. I had limited perspective at that time, but even from the perspective of now, it was a beautiful block. It was a half moon cut. So kind of a cut like this. And I marked that block and I said, I am not going to shape, I don't have the experience to make anything worth making out of this right now. I'm not going to make a pipe out of this block until I can sell a pipe for $1,000. Now at the time I'd sold probably 5 pipes or something. And my first one I sold for $150, I think, to Neil Flankbaum at Smoke and Holsters, the bag maker. So, and I think I'd maybe sold one for $250 or $300 at that point. I said, I'm not going to use this block of briar until I can make one that costs, until I can sell a pipe for $1,000, because this is a $1,000 pipe. Well, long after I'd made a pipe that could sell for $1,000, I kept looking at this block going, yeah, not yet, not yet, not yet. So this year, probably 2 months, I think it was about 2 months ago, I pulled that block out and I was like, you know what? Now's the time. What am I waiting for? And I cut into the block. I was so excited. I cut off the plateau, the live edge on the back of it, and there was a spot. It's like, okay, I can get around that. I shaved some off, shaved some more off, and more and more. And then I started getting upset because it got bigger and bigger. And the flaw went from all the way from the outside until right to the edge. That block, which was originally about this size, became a pipe sliver that was about like that. And it still has the flaw in it, and I'm going to keep it forever.
Are you going to make a tamper out of it?
I don't know. It's a pretty bad flaw.
You know, you say that as a flaw. I remember about 5 or 6 years ago, I used to work at a reclamation yard, so we get a lot of materials out from you know, buildings that have been knocked down. So you'd always get pitch pine and stuff like that. You know. And one of the first things that I stuck on the lathe, I was planning on making this really ornate table leg out of, you know, make really nice shapes up it, and then a tiger's or a lion's head at the top of it, and spun it round on it, and it was a massive big lathe. It was a floor standing lathe, and span round, and you kind of started to notice it as it was going, starting to go like this a wee bit. And you thought, doesn't look right. And then the block, of course, comes off, hits me in the face, and that's why I look like I do now. But you know, aside from that, see about.
But see, you got a lesson out of that.
Yeah. Don't put it in a lathe. But see, about 3 or 4 months later, we got this massive delivery of pretty much everything from maple, teak, pitch pine, western red cedar, all that sort of stuff. Delivered to the yard. Some of it had been taken from factories, and some of it had been taken from golf courses where a tree had maybe been blown down. And over here, they get the horse and cart to go over the golf courses to go and gather the wood to not leave the tracks that you know, a car would leave.
Yeah.
At that time, we were really struggling to keep on top of the amount of materials that we were getting in to make them into good order. So of course, we hired a temporary person to come in. And I remember walking round into the barn, round the back, to go and get this, what do you call it? To go and get a 2x4 bit of wood to finish off it. And this new guy was sitting in the corner with his big mallet hammer, knocking out bits of old nails, the old Victorian nails, the square ones, smacking away at it constantly. And I bent down to go and pick up something, and he started smacking my direction. I just kind of, you know, took a wee cautionary glance over and thought, oh crap, and went to stand up to tell him not to be such an idiot. I was going to use much more choice language, of course, at the time. And just as soon as I opened my mouth, didn't he happen to lose his grip on his hammer? And all I remember is seeing a hammer flying towards me and me hitting the ground. And see, just you saying there about nasty things that happen to you when you're doing woodwork, and I just remember this hitting me straight here.
I have done my best to learn from other people's experiences. When anybody has a story to share with me about being injured or making a mistake that could potentially have led to an injury in the shop, something I hadn't thought of, and there's a lot, I've always kind of added it to that bank of caution. But yeah, I do my best to learn from other people's experiences. I prefer not to learn those lessons myself.
Oh, no, that's wise. Let's just say I've got fake tooth, and the other one's been root canaled on the front teeth at the moment. But my excuse, at least from the Northern Ireland perspective, for drinking whiskey with you guys this evening is completely for medicinal purposes, in order to keep everything clean up here where the fake tooth is and all that. But if you're working in your workshop, even I know that you've been doing the pipe making for much longer than I have. I've only been sort of mostly carving, hand carving, instead of using wood lathes and such like. But if you get a helper in, tell them to stand at the opposite end of you and take the coronavirus rules of nowadays and put a big sheet between you and them.
Yeah.
Jeff, you had mentioned when we were talking back and forth on email that you had some recent projects that you were gonna maybe share with us. And
oh, sure, yeah, I can show you all what I've been working on.
Yeah, love to see that.
Sure. Well, I showed you some of them already, but let me see if I can lay them out. You know, when I take photos for my social media for Instagram, you try to make everything look nice and fancy and So you're going to see things in their natural state as they were just before I took the photos. Sitting on a rubber mat on my workbench. Let's see here. I've misplaced some things. This is half of my day is trying to find where I set down the pipe that I was working on. Okay, so I don't know, some of you who are familiar with my work and have maybe seen what I've been working on recently, I've had a recent fascination with facets. And this piece right here, I think, is pretty special. An octagonal billiard. This is the batch of pipes that I mentioned.
Gentlemen,
yesterday.
you can turn your microphones on now so we can properly ooh and ah.
Oh, beautiful.
Ooh.
There we go.
Awesome.
Ah.
Oh no, there's a mouse on your desk.
That's gorgeous. Wow,
And
that is
here's the
beautiful.
third in the series with a
Wow.
funky piece of bamboo that was grown here in California.
Wow, that's beautiful.
And then this
Oh,
with another piece of funky California bamboo.
okay.
This is actually going in the collection of Mr. Shane Ireland, who I believe you all had as a guest recently. For those who don't know, Shane is from San Diego originally, and I've known him for years and years and years, long before he worked at Smoking Pipes. Yeah, so those are my recent projects. And here's something kind of cool that I just saw, and I'm like, oh, y'all might be interested to see this. I occasionally make tampers.
Oh, that's beautiful.
But this is kind of interesting because this is in keeping with the Southern California vibe here. Let's see if I can find it. It is made from recycled skateboard decks.
Wow.
And so I'm going to have I'm going to try to add 3 or 4 of those to my website this week. I want to see if I can make some. It's just, I thought it was a cool material. Just do a limited run of these. They're fun.
Jeff, I want one in the shape of a surfboard.
Oh, I have one.
Oh.
This.
Oh, there you go.
It's a longboard, and this is made from the metal. I don't know the term for it. The metal piece that goes around a whiskey barrel.
That is some hip music, by the way.
Yeah, so that's what I've been working on. You know, I've always got a couple. Oh, here's the other project. I mentioned my friend Ping John from China, and we have some sets that we have just finished. A pipe that he made and a pipe that I made with a matching tamper, and they go in this bag that is custom made by our friend Claudio Albieri in Italy. These little stands go in here and they magnetically attach to the top so you can set your pipe in them.
Oh, sweet.
Yeah. He's a
That's
creative
awesome.
guy.
I don't have any around me there, but your recycled skateboard has just reminded me that you might be interested in what do you call it? Rainbow eucalyptus.
Oh yes.
Rainbow eucalyptus has the pretty much all the colors of the rainbow throughout the wood on bark. But it works exceedingly well if you're looking to make a tamper and have a multitude of colors throughout it. It's really beautiful. It's quite hard to get a hold of because no one ever wants to cut it down for obvious reasons. But see on Google and check out rainbow eucalyptus. See for tampers, especially if you can get thick enough bark for it. It's really beautiful.
Okay. Yeah, it's funny. I almost never make tampers. It takes a lot of time. Some people can slam, tampers out really fast. I'm not one of those people. I like to take a lot of care and time with everything that I do. So it's, it takes a long time for me to make them. So it's hard to justify taking the time away from making pipes to make tampers. But sometimes I'll see a material like this and I'm like, I think I want to make a tamper out of that. Or I like the idea, I don't know who suggested it, to make it out of that horrible failed pipe. That's a good way to commemorate it.
So Jeff, as we wind down this afternoon, I always ask our guests what questions that you might have for all of us. You got a focus group right here. You got a lot of enthusiasts. So like, what would you want to know from us?
Oh gosh. I mean, I can see a little bit of the variety of like places you all are from. You all talked about some of the pipes that you enjoy, and they're kind of all across the spectrum. Maybe I'd love to know maybe how long you have been a pipe smoker and how long you've been maybe a social pipe smoker. So someone who gets together in a group like this or goes to pipe shows or something.
Fellas, just jump in.
I've only been smoking a pipe for a little over a year. I used to smoke one back in the 90s. And then I was over at a buddy's house. We were enjoying a little bit of leisure time in the pool, and he handed me his pipe. And I went, sure, why not? Year and a half later, I have 7 of my own pipes, and I started making pipes last November.
All right.
Okay.
I suppose for me, it was probably about 4 or 5 years ago. My dad died back in 2007, and he had this little Shamrock Peterson pipe. And of course, back whenever I was 19 or 20 at the time, I shoved a lot of tobacco ripped out of cigarettes into it to see if that would do the job. Tasted awful, and completely, completely forgot about pipes until an ex-girlfriend bought me one of those really cheap Chinese plastic pipes with, the wee sort of metal cap in the top of it. That
never seen one.
Probably just as well, but it was pretty much after that it reminded me of my dad's pipe, which I've tried since, but it is so badly ghosted by whatever awful thing he smoked in it, or maybe the cigarette tobacco I put in it. But yeah, so I haven't ever managed to get to a pipe show or anything like that. UK seems to be really, really slim on pipe smokers or anyone that seems interested in it. You pull out a pipe nowadays, everyone thinks you're smoking something different in it, if you know what I mean. So
I live in California. Come on.
Yeah, Ocean Beach.
It's just assumed.
You got
Ocean Beach, you smell the nice, fresh ocean air on the boardwalk.
You guys have been really good crack this evening, so I really hope that even outside of the usual YouTube channels and all that sort of thing, that some of you guys might be interested in having a couple more sort of convivial smokes or something like that outside of that, which is recorded, because it's quite nice to share a hobby outside of what would be the norm here in Ireland, which I find extremely confusing.
I talk about this on some of my other communities that I participate in. So I try to create a place and a time and a consistency where we can all come together as a group. But now that you guys all have Zoom, this is a fantastic way. Just like, you find a buddy on here who lives in another country. There's no impediment though to saying, hey, what are you doing on a Sunday night? Want to just get together, we can play cards on Zoom, whatever, and smoke a pipe and just hang out. You don't have to wait for this. But I will also, we're making this as regular as possible every Saturday. I hope you all know that you're all invited, and that I love it when you guys all show up. So
a very good group. Thank you very much.
Stephen, you're welcome anytime.
For putting it on.
Any other feedback for Jeff?
Boris here from Finland. I was a pipe smoker in 90s for several years, but then I quit smoking for 20 years and came back about a year ago to pipes. the main reason maybe was the YTPC, which I noticed and started to follow different channels, and it kind of pulled me back.
The guys
been at it
have
for-
heard me tell this story a few times, but I'll share it with you, Jeff. I first started smoking a pipe back in the 70s and then quit for a long, long time. And I started with Borkum Riff.
Oh, wow.
Because I saw the commercial and I thought that every pack must come with a beautiful Scandinavian woman. And that was
How many packs did you have to smoke before you figured out the answer?
well, I lit up the first time and waited and nothing.
Yeah.
So,
Oh, you're still waiting, David.
I'm still waiting. That's right.
I've been smoking for 20 years. I smoke everything from these silly things that I find at yard sales to good Savinellis. I enjoy, like you, I enjoy all kinds of different tobaccos and all kinds of different pipes, and I mix and match just like you do. I don't keep one pipe for one type of tobacco, whatnot.
Yeah. Another
it's all
non-purist.
enjoyable. It's all enjoyable to me.
Mm-hmm.
And one thing that's just slightly off topic, I wanted to make a shout out to Jim Hannibal there. He mentioned that he makes Native American flutes, and I sent him a private note there that I play the Native American flute, and I'd like to chat with him a little bit about purchasing.
Oh, okay.
Huh.
Where are you located, Tim?
Pennsylvania,
Okay.
up toward Erie.
Where toward Erie?
Warren, or Pittsfield, PA, but
I'm from Meadville.
Oh, wow.
Born and raised.
Wow.
Wait, Jeff, where did you say you were from?
I'm from Meadville, Pennsylvania.
No kidding. I'm from Hazleton, Pennsylvania.
All right.
Yeah, opposite end of the state, but
Yeah. Yeah,
Well,
I
gentlemen,
grew up on Lake Erie.
It is about that time. Just like this was amazing. This was wonderful. The time has just flown by for me. I don't know about the rest of y'all, but
Well, thank you all for having me. It was great fun to meet you all, and I see some familiar faces and a lot of new faces, and it's a great pleasure to be here. I'm thank you.
Jeff, I hope that you'll come back and be our guest again sometime in the future. And
yeah, I'd be happy to.
So one last time for everybody here, a couple of things if I can. So first of all, a shameless plug for the Virtual Pipe Club. If you have not already gone to the YouTube page and joined, quote unquote, joined up on the YouTube page, it's simply a great way for me to keep track of how many people know about the Pipe Club. And also I try to do some announcements and updates about what's coming up in the coming week. So please go and do that. You just go on groups and the Virtual Pipe Club, and there we are. Second thing is that Jeff has both a YouTube channel and a website that I'll make sure I put it up on the Facebook page so that if you don't have to go searching for it, you'll get those links. And go subscribe to his YouTube channel, check out his website, Father's Day special, hint, hint.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to tell my wife about it. So,
and I just got some brand new shirts in. Some, I mean, it's the same design, but it's a different color, a red shirt. So those who want to have my brand on your chest, I love seeing it around, and they're available now.
Awesome. See, so lots of swag that you could be collecting there. On that note, I am going to chase you all away and tell you to go back and remember that you have family and whatnot. So I don't get in trouble. Wives texting me going, "What are you doing with my husband all afternoon?" Have a great week, guys.
You do the same, Dave.
Thanks so much.
Be safe, be
You
well.
too, Dave.
Jeff, you're amazing. I'm really glad that you came today.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. It was a pleasure being with you.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Take care, guys.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Call me.
All right.